Are we ready to get started?
You're a good man.
Are we ready? Okay. Welcome all to our Bountiful City Council work session tonight, and we are excited to have with us our Davis County Commissioner, Randy Elliott. We're so thankful for your time and your willingness to come and be with us here. Are we just turning the time over to you? That's what I believe. So I'd love to hear from you, and we're glad you're here.
Well, thank you. So just by formalities, yes, I was running some cows back and forth today, so that's why the cowboy hat and stuff. So my commission meeting got done, and I'm like, okay, this is the only time I've got to get this done. So I ran some cows up to Ogden, the Weber livestock auction, some other places, attend the auction, run back, and then back and forth and attend my other meetings. And I'm like, you know what, might as well own it today. So put the cowboy hat and the boots, and it's genuine on the back. So, but as for county-wise things, what we're going on, what's happening in the county. If you've been down to the courthouse, you've seen that remodel going on. It took us a while to get our windows as they were stuck out in the port. We finally got our windows in. We'll start doing the inside of that building. What we did with that building is that we told Farmington City that we'd restore it back to the original in 1930s building. There is an 1880s building inside that's encompassed inside that building, actually, that's a red brick. They built around it in the 1930s, and so we had to do some extra work as we discovered staircases and other things that were down there in the basement as well. But we're going to open up some of those areas so you can see some of those keystones that's really cool. And so we'll open up some of those areas as we plaster around and secure it. But it'll be housing on the main level, will be housing our pre-trial and indigent defense councils, what I call the state mandated stuff that the state says you're going to do this for us and not give you any funding. So that'll house that. The second floor will have a little bit for the American Legion and also some extra space, but where the original courthouse is, on the second floor, we took off the false ceiling. You can see the original corbels that were there, and they were made out of horsehair and mud. And so we're going to restore that as a conference room area. What was very interesting find in the basement, I don't know if we ever have told you, but we found several whiskey bottles from the Prohibition era. We figure it's either the commissioners were getting the drink on or the sheriffs, whoever was confiscating it, because it says not for resale on there, very specific, and it was from Kentucky straight bourbon. So
Wait, were they empty?
they were empty.
I don't know if they were confiscated then and not consumed.
Yeah, exactly. They were probably confiscated and consumed. So some of the monies that we're using from our federal government, we're looking at building an EOC for the county down there at the Davis County Complex. We can do that with some of those federal funds. Davis County got $69 million. And we can use that for that, and so we figured that might be a good need for Davis County as we have Hill Air Force Base, the train stations, the refineries, and everything else like that. And we get several windstorms every year, it seems like, and so we'll probably build most likely we're moving towards building a EOC, Emergency Operations Special Center, for Davis County there. We've taken some designs from out of Twilla and out of Salt Lake County, but ours will probably be a lot smaller, but be efficient to the needs for Davis County. Also, with those monies, a few years back, we put a referendum on building in some of our rural areas of our county, as a family came to me and asked if we could build 50-acre lot subdivision all on septic, and we said, ooh, let's study this. And so we changed our zoning from A1 to A1 and A5 to A10, and so that we could study and see what type of septic systems could be handled out there, and also what type of sewer systems could be out there in West Point Hooper area. And with this federal government monies, we're going to be putting $15 million plus towards a sewer infrastructure, kind of the main trunk lines, lift stations, and all that stuff out in those unincorporated areas of Davis County, as we encourage people as they incorporate, that they would incorporate as they develop, unlike some areas here in Bountiful and North Salt Lake. Valverda, if you guys know the history there, we still have some unincorporated pockets here in Davis County, up on your east side, and we would love to annex that someday. Other things that are going on in the county, our jail medical wing that will be completed here this summer. That was a project that we did this last couple of years, where when they built our facility, they had 300 beds and they added another 800 beds, but our medical area was still quite small. And so we've added another medical wing area so that we could take care of inmates that come in that might have drug, opioid, and other issues that they might have. Also have a pull-out area, and so we were able to pay that off as well this last year. And so that'll be paid off at the second floor for other operations for the sheriff's office. I can keep going on and on about different things, but I'll open it to questions. We are continuing to work with Bountiful on trails, getting the NEPA studies done. Those are all done, but kind of working collaboratively, with Bountiful on getting those projects done with Bountiful. So I'll open up to questions.
I've got one, Mayor, if you don't mind. I would love to hear an update on what's happening with the animal shelter. I know there have been changes in directors and some different plans that have been kicked around about a new shelter, and I've seen it on your agendas, but haven't made it over to one of your meetings to see
So
what the plans are.
So this last year, thanks to Gary Hill and the council and the support, we were able to go out and get a bill and change that we could go out for a tax rate with animal care. That'll happen the next 2 years, where we'll transition and have that tax rate. Currently, we are going out for a study, which we already got the RFP done, but we're gonna go out for a study to see what type of facility and size and scope that we need for Davis County. And so they've got the people that do that type of stuff are gonna analyze how much cats, cat dogs, blah, 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 per county, blah, 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 calls and all that type of stuff, and give us a rough estimate saying, okay, in the next 10 years, what will our population be for animals in the community, and we'll build to that type of structure. And so when we go out for that tax rate, we'll go out for the rate that will include a little bit of money for the bonding and also the staffing for that new building. We're working with UDOT, seeing when the West Davis corridor, if there's some areas of surplus property that we can maybe purchase or land swap, that we could build a new facility, because the current facility, as we've all have brought you guys up for tours, and if you haven't been up there, we'd love to take you on a tour. It's inadequate. It was built as a kill facility back in the late 1970s. And the model now is that we house animals, we try to get them to rescues, we try to get them adopted the best we can to get them out there versus just 3 days stay and they're euthanized. And so that is not the way we operate in this community. And so we're actively looking right now to see if we can find some property to build that facility. So if you have any suggestions, we would love that too. Great question.
So you don't think you would just keep it where it is now, but just build maybe?
No room. I mean, they'll study that as well to see, but if you look at that building, it's been added on and doesn't have the natural light. I mean, it'd really have to be a total demo and rebuild up there, and it's not an ideal location. Ideally, it would be somewhere off of a freeway on and off ramp where people can get easy access would be ideal.
It's in an awkward neighborhood situation, I would agree,
And the other problem with Kindleton is the crap backs up and floods our public works. So we've got grinders, we've got other things trying to resolve that, but there's still a problem with what is going on up there, so. And also, the problems are power, sewer, the building and the land, the situation there and everything else like that. And so there's a lot of compounding factors that make it not ideal to rebuild there.
Just that,
Yeah, just that.
Just as a follow-up, if I might, I know you've made some changes in the director there, and I'm curious kind of how that's working out, and if you're getting better partnerships with rescues and things like that.
Yeah, so this last year we had, well, how do we say this? Since I've been in office, we've gone through 3 directors, super fun. Our current director, Ashley Young, she came to us as a deputy director from out of Oregon. We put her in as interim for about 3 months to kind of test her, and she's been doing a great job, and we put her up as the director for animal care. So hopefully she'll be making the rounds to come introduce herself. But as far as what Ashley's been doing with the people up there and the staff, it's high morale. And then working with the rescues, things are going really, really great up there right now, so.
Last animal control question. Raccoons.
Yeah, I
We
know.
get raccoon questions a lot from our residents. Any chance that would ever be revisited on the wildlife side?
Probably not. I mean, I really can't say that we're going to revisit anytime soon, just because the manpower that we have currently that was eating up a lot of the time for officers even going out and doing what their real job is of, our bark logs, bark calls, bites, everything else like that. It would honestly take one guy full-time all day long running around just euthanizing raccoons to be able to do that. So, and that was a mutual decision with city managers and county commissioners that, and also getting some input that, we're the only county left in the Wasatch Front that still does that, and why are we still doing that? So,
It definitely made some noise,
I know.
although I understand the prioritization of animal control versus wildlife, so.
yep. And I've had to trap a few myself, so it's not very fun.
Do they still have live traps available for folks or not?
I don't know. So I've got live traps, so you're welcome to borrow mine.
Yeah. Yeah, we have them in our storage room.
Okay.
They're kind of creepy.
Yeah, they
They kind of skulk around,
yes, they do.
look like hunchback bears.
I won't tell you my story.
I have a question maybe about trails, and
I appreciate the county's development in trails up here on our bench. This last year has been really exciting, a lot of positive feedback on there. What else are you guys doing that I might not be aware of with the BST in particular north of us?
So the plan is that we'll have a continuous trail that we got the little short distance come into Mill Creek. The plan is to be able to continue that, go all the way into South Weber. We worked with UDOT and we'll be putting in an underpass when they do the reconstruction there on US 89 so we can connect into Weber Pathways. So the plan is that we'll connect all the way across and go all the way in to basically into Salt Lake City, which we're already got on this section. There is some homeowners and private property we have to work with, and so we're trying to work with the homeowners and, making sure that we're giving fair offers and everything else on those properties and getting easements through those properties. So it's going to be a kind of a time-consuming. We're doing section by section. We'll get done with the Forest Service most likely first in those sections, and then we'll start moving into those private property areas and working with them so that we can have that separate line going across. I know we have basically the Firebrick Road, but we want to make sure there's another trail access above that, or use the Firebrick Road when we can, but make sure that's a dedicated trail just for the hikers and bikers and all that. But the whole plan is interconnectivity. And hopefully get some connectivity too from east to west as well eventually.
Anything in the works for that, east to west?
Not currently.
I agree, that's really important.
Yep.
I know there's yet to be some negotiations with the private property owners near the B. But I just wanted to reiterate that we appreciate your working with us. We appreciate your help. We're excited and in making sure that the Eagle Ridge Drive Road is built this spring. And just wanted to thank you in advance for your partnership and work on that. And we'll definitely be in communications with you to hopefully, partner and make sure we get everything done up there so that we can have those improvements that we've been needing.
Yep.
So,
Lastly, just thank you guys for your service. We know it's thankless. We know there's long nights, some nights, and phone calls and everything else. And thank you guys for running and being in those trenches. We're in it together. So I'd like to say is we're trying to do our best for each community and what's going on in Davis County. At least as a commissioner, I've always been one that's like, I want to make sure each community knows that I'm involved. I want to be a part of your community and make sure the projects you guys bring forward, everybody gets equal treatment. And so we appreciate your city manager and all the willingness he's done. And we may argue sometimes, but we get along really well. But he's a good guy. And thank you guys for your service and your mayors and recorders and everybody and planners, because the guys worked hand in hand with us. So appreciate y'all. Thank you.
any other questions for Commissioner Elliott before we let him go?
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the partnership. Thank you. Okay, well, feel free to stick around, or if you need to leave, yeah, we understand if you need to go, but thanks so much. All right, so Gary, I will turn the time over to you for our legislative update.
Thanks. I think we'll all tag team a little bit on this for the benefit of people listening and for the rest of the council. And I might preface it by saying, we have mentioned last week or last council meeting that there is an increased sentiment of the legislature sort of consolidating control. And the league has begun tracking the number of bills just this session that they're tracking over 100 bills, but those specifically that either create an unfunded mandate for cities, preempt local authority in some way, or create a statewide standard in lieu of a local government standard like ADUs last year. So far, there are 27 bills that fall in that category. Many of them you're aware of, or some of you are aware of. Of those 27, 3 are related specifically to COVID. So if you take out those 3 public health things, that's still 24 bills so far that each one of which falls into one of those categories. And it's a very challenging thing, especially since any one of those bills by themselves, if, for example, it requires us to add a few $1,000s to our budget to do some additional accounting or record keeping. Might not seem like a big deal, but when you add that up with all of the bills, it becomes pretty burdensome. And there's just this continual feeling that the state legislature as a group tends to see city councils as groups to be managed as opposed to groups to partner with. And that's something that the league has asked us to make a point of talking to our legislators about. I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard, I believe in local control, but this specific issue is too important to leave to local control. Or, but the state really ought to have a hand in this policy. With that being said, maybe we can start out by giving an update on IPA, the IPA legislation, and then we'll kind of move into some of the other bills as we have time. We should have plenty of time. Kate, is that one that you're comfortable starting out with?
Why not?
I suspect
lived
you've
that
had
one.
more recent conversations today than I have.
Yes. So, as we've talked about before, there are a number of different bills that are targeted at IPA. And, lots of thanks to Mayor Harris for orchestrating communication with other mayors from the IPA cities. That outreach is definitely happening. I was informed of a communication from the Ephraim mayor that was received, and maybe not deeply appreciated, but was received yesterday. So the outreach is definitely happening. Councilman Higginson came and testified on HB 215, which has some implications on taking away our local authority to be charged with overseeing the power resources that Bountiful has and in determining rates to our residents for their municipal power, and offered really great, eloquent testimony about his service on the Power Commission and his role on the City Council.
Might we revisit how effective that testimony was?
Yeah, well, we were under no illusions that the bill was not going to move out, but it was important for those comments to be made on the record. So this package of bills still continues to advance. Our sister cities have definitely rallied. As I mentioned, we've had the mayor of Ephraim has done communications. Mayor Tammy Tran of Kaysville has been up this week, having meetings as well. We see some glimmers of efforts to have significant power brokers try and find solutions, and there's going to be some yet more meetings taking place Thursday morning to hopefully find some agreement on Senator Owen's bill on SB 92. The governor's office has been very helpful in trying to put some of those meetings together. We're still facing some challenges, quite frankly, on HB 215. This is Carl Albrecht's bill dealing with the Public Service Commission, and the bill that has the greatest likelihood to imperil the bonding for the plant. That still needs some effort. There's still bills dealing with the municipal exclusion on property tax for power. There's going to be a new water bill that will come out that will probably have some challenges that we'll need to work through. So it continues to be something that is, we've not yet reached a place where it feels like the project is not imperiled, unfortunately. The good news is we're in week 4 of the session, so while it feels like we're halfway through, that's actually still a lot of legislative time still to play out. So I'm hopeful that we'll get there. The financial partners that have been invested in the project, Mitsubishi and Chevron and Magnum, who have committed many millions of dollars to be partners with cities on this project, have all come forward with CEOs to say that they're concerned. So it feels like we are starting to turn this into a better position, but there's still a long way to go, and so I wouldn't want us or any of our sister cities to take our foot off the gas. And I should mention, Gary helped do a presentation to the LPC committee on Monday to ensure that the league took positions of opposition to those bills as well. So it definitely has been great to see Bountiful take such a leadership role on such an important project and part of our power portfolio. And then to see, I've gotten to see this play out a number of times, and I know Gary has, that when cities pull together, we can really affect some great change. It does sometimes take a little bit of work to get us all moving and marching in the same direction, and that is the case on this issue, but it definitely has started to come together from the league side, from Bountiful, from Murray, Kaysville, and even Ephraim.
Maybe just two things that I'd like to add to that. A little bit of a conversation about why HB 215 about the Public Service Commission is problematic for the bonding. Municipal utilities are not subject to the Public Service Commission. Utilities like Questar or Rocky Mountain Power have to go through the Public Service Commission to have their rates approved. It's been litigated all the way to the state Supreme Court that municipal entities don't have to go through the Public Service Commission because we already have a board of directors that does that, who are elected, and that's our city councils. What happens with the Public Service Commission issue is twofold. One, it makes those who might purchase the bonds concerned because it means IPP and IPA no longer have direct control over the ability to set their own rates, which is a big deal for bonding to ensure that you have adequate coverage for debt service. I think potentially equally damaging is the fact that if this legislation passes, we will probably, as an IPA, will probably have to sue the state. We believe it's unconstitutional. Throughout that entire, now this is me, I haven't heard this from IPA. This is me putting some pieces together. But the only way that if they pass that law to prove that it's unconstitutional would be to sue the state. For the entire period of time that may happen, it will put the project on hold. There won't be confidence enough likely to be able to bond. And so that during that period of time, it could really cost IPA, one, a lot of money, but two, a lot of potential goodwill with the other partners. And so it really is a critical piece of legislation. Kate, would that be, do you think that's an accurate statement?
It is an accurate statement. I mean, this project is likely going to have, in just the initial phase of building the plant, it's $2.5 billion worth of bonds. So it's a significant amount of money. The bondholders don't have recourse to the cities or the state. They have recourse only to the wholesale sale of power in these particular bonds. And so the bondholders need to have certainty in that path of recourse, since it doesn't fall back to us as one of the cities, and since it doesn't fall back to the state, I think is very important. And so that certainty, if you're going to give somebody that much money, is really important, and to have that imperiled is what potentially dooms the project or allows it to go forward.
On a bit of good news, it appears that the governor's office is supportive of the idea of repowering now, that they have sort of seen the light that this is beneficial. They aren't.
Can I ask, do you mean like they're supportive of retrofitting the plants?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. Was that you that helped them understand that?
In part, there's a lot of players, but in part, but to have the governor's office move to being in support of the renewal project, support of the new plant, and that continued attacks were not something that the governor's office supported was a big shift.
That is great. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, it's worth interrupting. That is a big shift. Now, of course, we have a legislature that has enough votes to override a governor's veto potentially. So there's a lot of work to do. But that is good news that we're not pushing against the executive branch anymore. And they're actually trying to help facilitate some of the conversations. So that's very good news.
Question, if I could. In the hearings last week, Representative Albrecht said that, and several people have now said it, that they're not interested in killing the repowering project. They think that both parts of this can remain. Is there a way to still use the coal-fired plant and repower at the same time?
So I'm glad that you asked, and I will try to make this not a super long answer.
Please.
But there are a number of factors that would make it not feasible for the coal plant to continue to go forward. The first of which would be that it's an 1,800 megawatt plant, and the Utah municipalities, if they were to pull all of their allotted power back, would not have enough power to efficiently operate one of the units, one of the 900 megawatts units. So right now, the power plant, being run inefficiently because natural gas has been cheaper, is running at about 8 cents a kilowatt hour. We have solar options that are at 5 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So it's a base load resource, but it's still a more expensive resource. If we were to run it at a less efficient level than we're currently running it, we would drive that kilowatt price up, and it would become less attractive for us to use versus anything else in our portfolio. Right. So that's the problem one, and we've not been able to find any Utah takers with transmission line access to replace our California municipal partners. The next reason would be the regulations dealing with the coal ash ponds. The Obama administration put forward new regulations, EPA regulations on those coal ash ponds. The Trump administration had the opportunity to roll it back and chose not to. So they've been in place. All of the power plants built in that era have unlined ponds, and therefore all the ponds are leaking. And so you're faced with a challenge. You either have to pick a path to permanent closure, which IPA designated several years ago, and that puts you in a certain regulatory path for remediation and cleanup, or you have to build and fund new lined coal ash ponds plus remediate the old ponds, which is a very expensive component that would then also be built into that kilowatt price, right, that we would pay. The second would be our air quality permits. Those have also been ratcheted down. The state of Utah has a state implementation plan, the SIP plan, and when Utah submitted its plan, it did so accounting for those two units to drop out of our air quality total for the state of Utah. So Utah as a whole would have to seek the opportunity to resubmit that plan, which we don't even know if is possible, and then add these units back in. Plus, instead, they did calculate that we would reduce the two coal units and add in the natural gas hydrogen unit, which would be still an overall reduction. So if we were to operate the 3 units, that definitely changes that state SIP plan. And then the fourth problem is, and this would be a state DEQ problem dealing with the Title V permits for those power plants. Because they're located at the same site, they'd be considered, even if they had separate ownership, even if you found an entity to buy the coal units and IPA owned the other units, because they're co-located and going into the immediate same airshed, the state would not allow us to divide that air permit. So we'd have to find the ability to have an air permit for 3 power plants rather than 2 or 1 that we're showing that reduction to get. So there are a lot of logistical hurdles to maintaining maintaining a coal unit. If we could find a buyer to run it efficiently so that we could be at that, 4 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour price point.
Mm-hmm. And legislators are slowly coming to this realization, or?
It's
Or the message
slowly.
needs to be-
It's interesting because this has been a 10-year project for IPA to make this pivot, for the Utah municipalities to seek other partners, be unable to find them. There's been multiple meetings that I've been part of over the years where we've been asked to meet with different parties to see if, it's like going on a blind date. Would you like to own a power plant with us? And after we go through all of this disclosure period, the answer consistently on the blind dates is they're not interested in a second date. Because no significant players are willing to invest in coal units, or they don't have the transmission capability to get it to some place that would like to use it. So we haven't found that partner. The state legislature turns over, and so some of the people we've educated on this are no longer serving. The people who represented the plant, particularly in the state senate, are no longer there, who were part of a lot of these discussions. And so we have to educate continually, and a lot of the legislators have now, over the last 2-ish months, have come to that conclusion that there isn't a viable buyer for the coal power. But even yesterday, I had a legislator tell me that we should continue to keep that plant in like a break glass in case of emergency status, where we just automatically break the glass and find people and water and coal and air permits and fire it back up.
Beautiful. So my uncle's an engineer that worked on the plant when it was being built. He said that when the turbines are turned off, they spin for more than a week before they stop. And then when they stop, they can't be allowed to sit for very long. They have to be manually turned because of the weight of the mechanism of the winding will flatten the bearings that are inside the units. So
They're
you
massive.
can't just turn it off and leave it sitting there.
That is
It would
that is
take
correct.
maintenance.
I've had the opportunity because of my day job connection to the plant, when they had a major outage, where they had to do some major repairs, where they took off all of that protective casing as they machined those parts, and it is impressive how big those things are. And for a future field trip, Gary, it might be nice to include that as a future field trip for the council to see that power resource, especially if, fingers crossed, we're able to see an opportunity as it transitions to a totally new fuel source.
Is the cheese factory still in
It's out
Delta?
of business.
Well, bummer. So any more questions about that bill? I mean, I can't say enough for everybody and the hours and hours and hours that Kate and Alan Johnson and others have spent on this. And as Kate said, it takes a long time to spin people up, and just like those turbines, I guess.
Just almost like a turbine.
Yeah, in reverse. So it's happening, and but we'll see where it goes from here still.
I was underwhelmed at the reaction in LPC meeting after your presentation.
They were tired.
I wanted pitchforks and torches, and there were like 2 comments.
I have a friend of mine who's a Giants fan who said he turned it off as soon as I mentioned the Dodgers, so maybe that was part of it. But no, I think we accomplished the goal there. And I will say this to credit the league. They have made this a priority when really it's a hard push for them.
Right.
This morning, when the board of directors that I sit on met with the governor's staff, they put this, I think, as second on the agenda to talk about the staff with, to make sure that we had time. And so really credit to Cameron and to your participation and Bountiful's participation at the league, that if we didn't participate all the time, we wouldn't get that kind of support from the league, so.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks, Gary. Do you want to move on to the next item?
Yeah, oh, there's so many fun ones. Let's hit secondary water metering, shall we? So at the most recent Legislative Policy Committee meeting, we learned a little bit more about House Bill 242. This would be a requirement for all pressurized secondary water systems to implement meters at the user's end by a certain date. And the last date that we heard was 8 years from now that would have to be accomplished. A part of the bill is a very significant appropriation. I think it right now is, the ask is $200 million. that would be a partial or matching grant to irrigation districts, municipalities, and others that would be required to do the retrofitting of the meters. I mean, that's a, no pun intended, it's a little bit of a drop in the bucket in what the actual cost would be. There's been a lot of conversation about maybe focusing that money and the timeline onto those districts that perhaps impact the Great Salt Lake first, or that can have the biggest bang for their buck. The intent of all this, of course, is to keep water that's already in the system, make it available for both the Great Salt Lake, and new development and culinary uses, because it's a lot cheaper to use water that's already in the system than it is to develop a new system, say a dam on the Bear River or something like that, which has been in the works for probably 40 years anyway. Huge expense. Now, this wouldn't affect Bountiful City directly because we know we don't operate the secondary water system. We have 3, I think, secondary irrigation districts in Bountiful, if I remember right. Dual Creek, Bountiful Irrigation, and South Davis Water. So they would be the ones that would be required to do this. But of course, it affects, we have all the same taxpayers, so it affects, or ratepayers in this case, it would affect everybody the same. Heard this morning that, you know, the governor's pretty, he thinks the timeline's pretty important. He's resistant to moving that timeline out. There were a lot of good points raised that trying to have every irrigation district in the state do this at the same time would be really challenging as far as finding consultants and finding materials and finding contractors. And so I think there's a lot of work to do on this. But if, you know, for those that have been keeping score at home, this has been an issue that has come up over and over and over again. And I think there's some real legs this year to pass legislation that would mandate this. So this definitely falls in the category of mandates. At this point, partially funded, but certainly not nearly enough to cover the costs. So, any questions, or, you know, Mayor Richard, additions to that?
I've got a question. What's the infatuation with the Great Salt Lake this year?
I don't know that it's specifically this year, but I think the drought, just like years where we have really bad air quality,
Sure.
we see a spate of legislation about air quality. I think the drought has brought a lot of people's attention to the Great Salt Lake. I think it's been a conversation for a long, long time about maintaining that ecosystem. It just seems to be a flavor of the month a little bit, but I don't see it going away.
I think the other factor is that the speaker's district includes the Great Salt Lake and includes Antelope Island. And he used his time and resources and staff to organize a Great Salt Lake Summit just before the session started. And he's, Speaker and the President don't generally carry legislation, and he's got 3 bill files this year, which is unusual. I mean, they only carry bills if it's like a resolution saying Utah would like to have the Olympics again. That's all the Speaker and the President ever carry, or those types of feel-good things. And so he's put his time, talents, energy, resources, caucus, staff behind kind of staking out a claim that he thinks the Great Salt Lake is important, that the fact that he feels like he could, you know, walk in farm boots from his house to Antelope Island is scary and significant. And so he's using that power that being the Speaker gives him to take it up several notches.
Do you have a
Yeah, so
comment?
I serve on the Great Salt Lake Advisory, and I'm also on the Beaver Basin Board. But on the Great Salt Lake Advisory role of that, it's a non-for-profit board that serves at they appointed about 10 years ago to kind of address the lake issues. And this is historically the lowest that the lake has ever been from the times that we've taken records. And the mineral extractions, and then also the brine shrimp, and then also just the salt content that blows off of there. There was a heightened concern about, well, is this lake ever going to come back? Because some of those other salton lakes in the world, you know, they've drained them so much that they're not coming back. And that ecosystem, well, how are we going to address that? And so this year, as we know, with the water as it is and no storms in sight, it's kind of scary for the ecosystem of the lake that it's dwindling. And so how do we get more water back into that lake, whether it's metering, whether it's, more conservation efforts. I know there's some bills that are a little bit controversial about pre-prioritizing our water rights, and that's got a lot of farmers very up in the air right now of, well, how's that gonna look for us, that we have these 1886 water rights, and now the governor's gonna say we don't have priority, it goes right to the Wasatch Front, and so there's a lot of skepticism right now on those bills that are coming through, because it's kind of a water year, but that's what kind of the answer to that question is, they're concerned about the lake not coming back, and so trying to get water back in the lake is the big thing.
Thanks. Other than creating water, it's an inward draining basin. Nobody's exporting water outside of the Great Salt Lake drainage. So unless they want to pipe in the Colorado River or something else, I don't know that there's going to be, unless we get more snow.
So I think that's part of, to Gary's point about, the water that's currently in the system, how to be more efficient with it, because your other options to get more water to the Wasatch Front continue to divert water away from the lake. So, if you can leave the Bear with its flow into the lake and get any other meaningful water from the Jordan, from the creeks that come out of Davis County, then that's helpful. It's definitely having its moment. I mean, not since 1983 has the lake had a moment, so it's its turn. It's been a while. So it's time for the lake to return to having a moment in the sun of state focus.
Perfect.
We just have a few more minutes left. Do you want to finish up with any last items?
So many good ones to talk about. This is so enjoyable. Yeah, I'll mention a couple that people may not be aware of. House Bill 23, First Responder Mental Health Services. This is a well-meaning bill, which recognizes the mental toll that our police officers and first responders, firefighters, and others, the mental toll that their profession takes on them, seeing things that most of us would never want to see, dealing with those kinds of things. And what it would do is it would mandate that cities provide mental health services for first responders and for their families. The concern with it is, and we do that currently, we have an employee assistance program where all employees in the city have access to mental health services, as do their families. It's a very small per-person premium that the city covers on behalf of the employees. The concern with this bill is that there's no end date, that this would apply to first responders for the rest of their lives and their as currently written, and their families for the rest of their family lives. And so that's a pretty big blank check without a lot of good definitions. And so we're hoping, and Ryan Wilcox is the sponsor. He's a pretty good guy. We're hoping that he'll be able to work with us to sort out some of those details. But if it passes without sort of an end date, say at the end of employment, it's going to be challenging to see what we do for that, how we continue to provide benefits for people who no longer are employees. So that's one we're keeping a close eye on. Had another couple that I wanted to mention. Landscaping requirement prohibition, I don't think has seen a lot of movement yet, at least it hadn't last I checked, but
I was just going to say, it hasn't seen movement, but it is in the committee tomorrow. HB 95, Representative Ward's bill.
Okay, and the substitute has been drafted. That's the substitute we talked about that does allow us to enforce our ordinances. It doesn't take that power away, but so we'll see where that one goes. There's so many more that are so fun, but I think those are kind of the highlights for tonight. If you want to, I'm happy to answer any questions, or Kate or Richard or Kendallin, who've all been at LPC, if there are others that I'm forgetting off, and I know I'm forgetting lots, want to bring up tonight.
Are there any more that you want to mention? I mean, we have a few more minutes if there's.
There was one, and I didn't write it down, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but I guarantee you I will not remember right now. I'll remember about 5 minutes into the regular meeting. But it wasn't critical, but it was another preemption, local mandate kind of a bill that we're concerned about.
Well, thank you so much for the hours you've been spending, and Kate as well, Councilwoman Bradshaw, and thank you, Councilman Higginson, for testifying and for being involved. Are there any other questions about or any other thing you want to add, Kate?
I can mention my favorite bill that I am following this year. I pick a favorite every year. This year, it has to do with what should be our state crustacean. And what, might you ask, should our state crustacean be that would be paired with, our state cooking pot, the crock pot, in case you were wondering? Well, it's a proposal that it is the brine shrimp would be our state crustacean, so.
Can't eat a brine shrimp.
It's moving through, maybe not as quickly. It may need some friendly support. It is tied with my other favorite, bill that has just moved into second place about the zipper method. What is the zipper method, you ask? Well, it's a very important traffic safety bill about how vehicles ought to merge. Sort of like how we can't ever figure out how to do a four-way stop. People can't figure out how to merge when a lane is ending, and so this would be a state law that would tell us how to do so using the zipper method. Unfortunately, I don't think that there are many crustaceans native to the great state of Bountiful, or the great state of Utah. And so I think it stands alone. But, we've had to have battles about our state mineral versus our state rock, so that we could make sure that both copper and coal and other stones were covered in different ways so that they all felt special.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for those updates. Did you remember it, Gary? Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of your work in representing us and cities in general. And we will take a little break before we start our regular meeting at 7. And thank you, Commissioner Elliott, for being here.